Hi, I'm Jennifer from Unveiled Wife, and today I have Michelle with us, and she's going to be sharing a little bit about her experience with Wife After God. So, hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for
How,
having me, Jennifer.
absolutely. So, can you just tell the community a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I am 38 years old. I have two children. I've got twins that are 4 years old, and I am married to my high school sweetheart. So we have been together for 23 years, but married 16 of those years. So there was a little bit of a separation within the marriage a few years ago, but we are now back together and moving strong.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that you guys have reconciled, and I think that that in itself is a lot of hope for other women who may be in that situation right now or who are trying to reconcile with their husband. So,
Absolutely.
thank you for mentioning that. Well, today we're going to jump into specifically chapter 13 of Wife After God, and I'm wondering if there's anything specific about that chapter that really stood out to you.
Two things. The first one was that I never thought about the polarization of pride. I always thought of it as something positive and I've got pride in my appearance or something along that nature, but I didn't think of it as something that could be polarizing. And Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2, that is really what drove it home. It reads, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. And I now see pride in a completely different light.
Mm. So, can you talk a little bit about how God has walked you through, that journey of being a wife who can contain that pride or get rid of it altogether?
Yeah, I was talking to my husband about this chapter, and um, really what it came down to, I probably should have mentioned earlier, I'm a new Christian. I am very new in my faith, and I wasn't allowing God to talk to me. I was ignoring the messages that he was sending to me. And I think that that's what ultimately was detriment to my marriage. So, opening myself up to hearing him and his message and really taking accountability for my actions, that's when I started to see that pride was a problem that I needed to really manage. And pride has touched me in a big way.
So, how would you say that pride keeps couples from experiencing intimacy in their relationship?
Pride is exclusionary. And what I mean by that is it makes it very easy for us to say, I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to do it without my husband, or I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it without him. And when you exclude somebody from something, whether that be God or your husband, you immediately squash any potential for intimacy that you might have.
Mm. That word squash, it's such a powerful descriptive word because so often when we do have pride in our hearts, and I'm talking about that ugly, strong-willed pride, it really does, like you say, it excludes us from being able to be intimate, and it squishes that opportunity and any really desire in our hearts for experiencing intimacy in our relationships. And I know that I've struggled with that as a wife for sure. Do you have a specific story that maybe you could share with us that, when you have experienced pride and how it affected your marriage?
Absolutely. Um, when I enrolled into graduate school, I did so without so much of a word to my husband. I came home one day and said, guess what I did? I enrolled in graduate school. And he sat down with me and said, maybe you should think about this. Our marriage was already in a state of hurt, but I think that I was oblivious. At the time, it was more my thought process of saying, well, he obviously doesn't know how important this is to me or how good it could be for our family. And I just let my pride take over, and I continued on with school. And I didn't figure out until years later that that was a major contributing factor to the demise of my marriage at that time, was that I was taking away from him, taking away from our marriage, and there wasn't intimacy, and I let it take a hold of me. Mm-hmm. And it took the crumbling of my marriage for me to stop and really talk to God and say, you know what, I need to learn something from this, but I'm not sure what it is. It took a long time for me to realize that those behaviors were instrumental in destroying our relationship. And I had to reconcile that with myself and ultimately with my husband.
Hmm. Pride is so interesting because I think it's something that pretty much everyone has struggled with at some point. How would you say, or what would you say helps you identify when pride kind of creeps into your heart or mind?
Well, there's two ways. My husband started saying this out of a joke, but it became something that we started to take very seriously. And he'd say, "Please let me be the man." And that is a stopper for me. I mean, I immediately will stop and say, okay, something I'm doing here, I'm trying to be alpha female, and I'm trying to, my ego is taking over. And that is just, immediately screams prideful behavior for me. In addition, it's when I feel like I am doing things a little bit too much as an individual. That's when I start to really go inside and say, why am I doing it this way? And how's that being perceived by my husband? And how would God want me to handle this? How can I behave in a way that is more respectful to God and to my husband?
That's good. So, once you identify the pride and then you have to try and reconcile, whatever situation has happened with your husband, can you describe a little bit about what is required or what that looks like?
There's a lot of apologizing. And that was probably the most difficult thing for me to overcome, because apologizing takes responsibility and it takes accountability. If it's true, in my opinion, if it's truly meant, then there's a certain accountability that comes with it. And that's how the apology starts the conversation. And then taking a step back and thinking about my actions and talking with my husband allows me to overcome any prideful behavior that may be wanting to kind of creep in and take over. And I work at it. It's hard. It's a hard one for me, but it's something that my husband understands, and he knows that, he's patient with me about it, thankfully.
And what you said about, it requires apology. And in order to apologize, that requires humility. So by exercising humility, you're actually doing the opposite of what pride is. So it kind of combats it. That's really great. Well, is there one more thing that you'd like to share with the community? Something that maybe God's been teaching you lately? It could be with being a wife or being a mom. Anything that would inspire these women that are listening?
My journey is really, lately the theme has been focused around learning to be a Christian. And for me, learning scripture has been the biggest challenge, the hurdle that I've been really seeing lately. And I think that doing devotionals like Wife After God has allowed me to read scripture in a way that's meaningful and in a way that makes sense to me. Life application is key for me to really learn something. So I would encourage any of the wives out there who are new Christians that are maybe new in their faith or finding what their faith looks like, to keep at it, to keep reading, to keep learning, and to keep growing. And the more you do that, the closer your relationship with God will be, and ultimately with the people who you love in your life, like your husband and your children.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for just taking the time to share with us today. And I'm just praying that you and your husband continue to grow and mature and do wonderful. And I'm just so thankful that you're a part of the Unveiled Wife community and that you spent time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.